Welcome, everyone. Before we dive into this incredible story, take a moment to comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from people all around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more inspiring content like this. Now, let's get into the story. The night was bitterly cold in downtown Chicago. The wind howled through the alleys, rattling the garbage cans and sending newspapers flying across the empty streets. The city never truly slept, but this part of town, where the forgotten souls of society huddled in doorways and under bridges, felt like it had been abandoned by time itself. Among them was a man named Ben, wrapped in a tattered old coat, his fingers stiff from the cold as he tried to find warmth near the exhaust vent of a closed diner. Ben had been on the streets for 3 years. Life had not always been this way. There was a time when he had a job, an apartment, even a fiancée, but a series of bad decisions, a job loss, and a string of unfortunate events had brought him here. No family to turn to, no friends willing to help. The only thing he had left was his will to survive. He pulled his coat tighter around himself and looked up at the sky. It was a clear night, the stars shining above the towering buildings that seemed to touch heaven itself. He used to believe that the sky was limitless, that life was full of possibilities, but now all he could see was a world that had no place for him. At that moment, a sleek black car pulled up near the curb across the street. It was a luxury sedan, the kind only the rich could afford. The man who stepped out was sharply dressed, his black coat perfectly tailored, his leather gloves expensive. He looked like he belonged in a magazine. Ben had seen men like him before, powerful, important, untouchable. This man had a purpose, unlike Ben, who had lost his long ago. But then, from the shadows, 2 figures emerged. Ben had been on the streets long enough to recognize trouble when he saw it. The 2 men moved with practiced ease, their hoods pulled low over their faces, their hands slipping into their pockets. A mugging was about to happen. He had seen it too many times before. But this time, something inside him refused to look away. He didn't know why, but he felt the need to act. The CEO barely had time to react before one of the men pressed a knife against his side. "Wallet, watch, phone," the mugger hissed. "Make it quick." The CEO, whose name was Richard Langston, stiffened. He was no fool. Money wasn't worth his life. He started to reach into his coat pocket, but before he could hand over his wallet, a voice cut through the night. "Hey, get away from him." Ben didn't think. He just moved. His feet carried him across the street before he even knew what he was doing. The 2 muggers turned, surprised. Ben might have been homeless, but he wasn't weak. Years of living on the streets had toughened him. He grabbed the nearest trash can lid and swung it at the man with the knife. The metal made a loud clang as it struck the attacker's arm, causing him to stumble back. "You picked the wrong guy tonight," Ben growled, his voice hoarse but firm. The second mugger hesitated. Richard used the moment of distraction to step back, reaching for his phone. But before he could call for help, the first mugger cursed, grabbed his friend by the arm, and they both ran off into the darkness. Breathing hard, Ben turned to Richard. "You okay?" Richard dusted off his coat and adjusted his tie. "I think so." He eyed Ben curiously. "That was incredibly brave of you." Ben shrugged, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Just did what I had to. They would have taken everything. Maybe even hurt you." Richard studied him for a moment. "What's your name?" "Ben." "Ben, do you have somewhere to go?" Richard asked, glancing at his worn coat and the tired lines on his face. Ben let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah. Just around the corner. Best suite in the alley. Comes with a free newspaper blanket." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he made a decision. "Come with me." Ben blinked. "What?" "I want to thank you properly. Let me buy you a meal. Get you somewhere warm for the night. It's the least I can do." Ben hesitated. This wasn't the first time someone had offered a handout, but this felt different. Maybe it was the way Richard looked at him, not with pity, but with something else. Respect? Curiosity? He couldn't tell. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since morning. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but just dinner. No charity." Richard smiled. "Deal." As they walked toward the car, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that this night was the beginning of something bigger than he could understand. He had stepped in to save a stranger, but maybe, just maybe, that stranger was about to change his life forever. The warmth of the restaurant was almost overwhelming after the cold outside. Ben sat stiffly in a plush chair across from Richard, feeling out of place among the well-dressed patrons and elegant surroundings. The restaurant was one of those high-end spots with soft lighting, quiet jazz music, and waiters who move with precision. Ben had never stepped foot in a place like this before. A waiter approached, placing menus in front of them. Ben hesitated before picking his up. His fingers, still numb from the cold, trembled slightly. Richard noticed but said nothing. Instead, he studied Ben with quiet curiosity. "Order whatever you like," Richard said. Ben glanced at the menu, his eyes widening at the prices. "This place is expensive. A burger here costs more than I used to make in a day." Richard chuckled. "Consider it a thank you for saving my life." Ben hesitated, then nodded. He wasn't about to turn down a good meal. When the waiter returned, he ordered a steak with mashed potatoes and a side of vegetables. It was more food than he had eaten in weeks. As they waited for their food, Richard leaned forward. "Tell me about yourself, Ben. How did you end up on the streets?" Ben sighed. "Long story. I had a job, an apartment, even a fiancé once. Lost my job, bills piled up, fiancé left. One bad thing after another, and before I knew it, I had nowhere to go. Been surviving ever since." Richard nodded. "Sounds like life hit you hard, but you're still here." "Still fighting." Ben smirked. "Not much of a choice, is there?" Their meal arrived, and Ben savored every bite, his hunger overriding any embarrassment he felt. Richard watched him, nodding approvingly. The warmth of the restaurant, the comfort of a full meal, these were luxuries Ben had almost forgotten. After a few moments of silence, Richard placed his utensils down. "Ben, I don't think our meeting was a coincidence. I believe in second chances, and I think you deserve one." Ben swallowed his food slowly, unsure of what to say. "What do you mean?" Richard leaned forward. "Come work for me. I'll give you a job, a place to stay, and a fresh start." Ben's eyes widened. "You serious?" Richard smiled. "Dead serious. What do you say?" Ben hesitated. "I don't know anything about business. I've been on the streets for years. What kind of job could I possibly do?" Richard leaned back, considering. "You're quick, observant, and you don't back down from a challenge. That's more than I can say for a lot of people who work for me. We can start with something simple. Office work, maybe security, and if you're willing to learn, I'll teach you more." Ben wiped his mouth with his napkin and looked away. "Why are you doing this?" Richard exhaled. "Because I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. When I was younger, I lost everything. I was homeless for nearly a year before someone took a chance on me, gave me a job, a purpose. It changed my life. And now, I want to do the same for you." Ben was silent for a long moment. The idea of having a job, a roof over his head, it seemed too good to be true. "What if I screw up?" Richard chuckled. "Then you learn and keep going. No one expects perfection, just effort." Ben stared at his plate, his mind spinning. Then he looked at Richard. "All right, I'll do it." Richard extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Ben." Ben hesitated, then shook his hand. For the first time in years, he felt something he had nearly forgotten: hope. The next morning, Ben found himself standing outside one of the tallest office buildings in downtown Chicago. Dressed in a clean set of clothes Richard had given him, he barely recognized himself in the reflection of the glass doors. Richard met him in the lobby. "Nervous?" Ben exhaled. "A little." "Good. That means you care. Come on, let's get started." As they stepped into the elevator, Ben realized that the cold alleyways, the hunger, the hopelessness, it was all behind him now. He had a new path ahead, and for the first time in a long time, he was ready to walk it.